Welcome to God Seeker. This is Elizabeth Fulgaro. The current message: love one another. Love one another as I have loved you. The world will know me, Jesus, as you love one another. Bless those who persecute you. Pray for those who hurt you. These are the words of Jesus. If you say you love God, who you cannot see, but do not love one another, then you do not actually love God. God says to love Him and one another. Such are some of the words of one of Jesus' first followers named John, who wrote letters to other first-century believers, which we still have today in the Bible. You may be familiar with or have heard of the Ten Commandments. This is a set of rules God originally gave to Moses as the basis of the new communal life God wanted for the Israelites. They had been slaves in Egypt for about 400 years. When He arranged for them to be freed, they needed a new communal structure. The do's and don'ts of the commandments provided this foundation and grew into a litany of hundreds of well-intended rules in place within the Jewish community when Jesus came. Jesus' message did not eliminate the commandments, but showed what God had really meant by these. Jesus brought the fullness of what love God and love one another looks like, according to how God designed it to be. Love is not an emotion, though it can be. Love is a way of life, which is grounded in commitment to one another, which spirals outward from self into actions because we are aware of the priority, not just of self, but of one another, where we are each responsible for self, but this is not just for the sake of self, but for the sake of community. It results in personal action for care of those around us as Spirit leads. I'm not talking here about government, but for us as a community by free will choice as directed by the will of God, to serve one another more. All of us together as part of the community of God, which is under God and His authority and purview, whether we choose to recognize it or not. Yes, all of us under God, to varying degrees cognizant and looking to function as such, each on his or her way with Spirit working through each one to supply what the other needs at a particular time. He uses us. He works through us. In fact, to the extent we do not love one another, treating each one where they are with the respect and worth with which God designed that one, to this extent we are at odds with the purposes of God. This communal aspect is not completely the way I was raised. I don't think it was on purpose. The culture around me, especially in the American West, was one of pulling yourself up by your cowboy bootstraps, which meant to be self-reliant. And there remains nothing wrong with being self-sufficient as a way of contributing to the health of the whole. The West was mostly a population of recent immigrants who had spread out on homesteads on wide open spaces where your neighbors could and would help when there was need, but generally you were on your own. Not in a self-focused way, but one where you were responsible for you. There was no backup because others were too far away. One aspect of the messages from God contained in the Bible is that we are called to work as well as we can to be financially self-sufficient. No person idle, but each contributing to the overall wellness of the whole. But this is not just for the benefit of the one. It raises the healthiness of all. Love one another as I have loved you. Seek to not be a burden to any other in this regard. And when you are in need, be open and gracious to receive as others love you by helping to provide. You are not living in isolation or unawareness of others, but everything done, yes, to care for self, but with the broader benefit of the community in view. We are not unto ourselves. We were created for one another. Our actions, attitudes, as well as what we don't do will affect each other, and not always positively. Love one another. It's not a feeling, but a commitment. Like everything else, you will never be able to love perfectly. Often the how of what love looks like may not seem clear-cut. Other times our efforts may be misunderstood or have adverse effects. The call to remain humble, to know you do not know it all, not to insist on your own perfection, because that's the one thing which is not true. To own the effect when it was unintended and where damage occurred, especially when unintended. Not to justify actions, but to work to make things right. In the end, this love which is commitment and not mere feeling is the only legacy which lasts. Its effect or not is what we can leave behind, which matters. We are community, whether we acknowledge it or not. We must love one another. Love one another. Love one another as I have loved you was Jesus' message. And you do not have to fix the world. You do not have to tell everyone when they are wrong and you are right. Jesus served people. He loved them. He brought the reality of God so others wanted to live like him, with him as their leader, not just with words, and definitely not by forcing them, but by how he treated other people, especially the people whose society wrongly deemed as less or unacceptable. There are no unlovable people to God. We need to look less to government to usher in God's way, which was not what Jesus did at all. We need to look to how Spirit wants us to be God's presence to others. If we will love as Jesus did, by the empowerment and leading of his Spirit, imagine how our societies would change to be more godlike, to reflect his kingdom culture on earth as in heaven, no matter the laws and no matter the cost. Here is a description of God's love, which does not stand for what is wrong, but works always for what is good and right and fair for all people. Letter of Paul to the Corinthians, chapter 13, verses 1 through 8. If I can speak in the tongues of men and even of angels, but have not love, that reasoning, intentional, spiritual devotion, such as is inspired by God's love for and in us, I am only a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers, the gift of interpreting the divine will and purpose, and understand all the secret truths and mysteries, and possess all knowledge, and if I have sufficient faith so that I can remove mountains, but have not love, God's love in me, I am nothing, a useless nobody. Even if I dole out all I have to the poor in providing food, and if I surrender my body to be burned, or in order that I may glory, but have not love, God's love in me, I gain nothing. Love endures long and is patient and kind. Love never is envious nor boils over with jealousy, is not boastful or vainglorious, does not display itself haughtily. Love is not conceited, arrogant, and inflated with pride. It is not rude, unmannerly, and does not act unbecomingly. Love, God's love in us, does not insist on its own rights or its own way, for it is not self-seeking. It is not touchy or fretful or resentful. It takes no account of the evil done to it. It pays no attention to a suffered wrong. It does not rejoice at injustice and unrighteousness, but rejoices when right and truth prevail. Love bears up under anything and everything that comes, is ever ready to believe the best of every person. Its hopes are fadeless under all circumstances, and it endures everything without weakening. Love never fails, never fades out, or becomes obsolete, or comes to an end. Listen to the song Lion and Lamb from the Restore album. Let God remind you as you pray this victorious song that his power is at work in and through you for others too. You can find the song Lion and Lamb on my YouTube channel, on various streaming services, and always on CD. Thank you for joining in. God Seeker messages are brought to you by Eagle's Nest Foundation. Until next time, I am praying for you. Make lion and lamb your exclamation point to God and keep seeking Him.